All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love each and every day, including here on our SEC platform. So we have dedicated this spot each and every Thursday night to talk SEC football with all of you. So lock it in right here, 6 o'clock Eastern time, every Thursday night with you. And when I think SEC football and I think, okay, who can I pin down that I can fire anything at across the conference? Who's that guy? Well, it's Brent Beard from First Coast News and College Sports Today. Brent, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing well. It's always good to be on with you. Regardless, games or no games, there's plenty to talk about, plenty going on that either is directly with the SEC or has some association with it, right? So glad you're doing well and glad to be on with your listeners and viewers today.
Absolutely. So our ratings, unfortunately, might be slightly down coming from College Station and the surrounding areas, we know. And I'm not poking fun at all because they've had some serious weather conditions to deal with, power outages, accidents all over the place, just severe conditions there in Texas.
I'll tell you what, Mark, too, my twin brother, Brett, who works at does sports radio in Huntsville, Alabama, that area, they've had a difficult time too, and so is that Nashville area. As you know, Huntsville and Nashville is about 100 miles from each other. But Brad has not been able to do his daily sports talk show any day this week because the weather has been so bad. The engineer can't get to the station, Mark. So and listen, as you know. Usually the engineers will go in sled dogs if they have to, but when you can't get to the station, brother, that's bad news, isn't it?
Those engineers are important. Those technical guys make it all work. You know, the rest of us just move our mouths and make a lot of noise, but they make it all happen. No doubt about that. All right. Yeah, again, much to talk about. And Brent, I'll let you know off the top, certainly whenever you need to take off, just head on out. We'll be here about 45 minutes or so in total. And we'll take the comments there in the live chat. So I'll be monitoring the live chat for your comments, your questions, debate topics there. Recruiting, the lifeblood of all college football teams. But it's been the main reason why the SEC has separated itself for years. The talent's there and they keep it at home. The dead period has been extended, and if anyone's not familiar with the dead period, it's basically the time in which players cannot visit campus, and that has been extended due to COVID conditions in the past, and now we just understand here in the last 24 hours that it's been extended now, Brent, to May 31st.
Mark, I tell you that this is becoming a lot more irritating, I think, to coaches and to administrators than anything else. I mean, we see the comment from Ross Bork, one of the SEC athletic directors, who basically is talking about that it really is time to lift that dead period. And I think he's got a valid point. Is sometime, Mark, you've got to take into consideration you've got your protocols, you've got your medical staff, you've got your trainers. And look, if you can go through an entire football season, why can't you go ahead and open this up? Look, I understand the risk if you've got families coming in, but I frankly think Morris got some logic to this, Mark, and it's at some point let and begin this process again. Now that they will be careful with social distancing and mask and the whole 9 yards, but and I think a lot of these coaches are saying we're going to really be doing these players a disservice if we can't start this certainly now by June the 1st. Mark, would you have ever believed that it would have been over a year, basically, to go with a dead period? So we've gone from being careful, but now the people are really questioning this committee of really how do they understand the process and why do they not let the schools use the expertise and the professionals they've got and get this process open again.
I'm right there with you. Ever since this situation started, that's very serious, of course, but I have been to, I don't know how many states. And certainly there are different guidelines and conditions in every state, and the severity of it has fluctuated. So it's not like a hot spot has stayed in one area of the country. It's been sporadic all over the place throughout this entire year. But the masks in place, the sanitary conditions, the distancing, we experience all of that in our daily lives every day in the business that needs to be conducted and going grocery shopping, doing all the things that we need to do anyway. And I have a daughter who's on campus right now, and some of her classes have been compromised, but she's gone to other classes. So there's life on campus being conducted fairly normally right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that I know they need to review it. And I just thought at this point that they would go ahead and open it up so that the coaches could do what they need to do. And look, Dan Mullen, who, by the way, Florida started spring practice today. And I thought Mullen made a good point. He said, look, I'm gotten pretty good with the Zoom stuff, but he said, until I've got a prospect that's standing at midfield in the swamp, I can't really tell him what this is about and what we're doing until he's there to experience it. Right, Mark?
It's the most important decision that most of these student athletes have made to date in their lifetime.
Right.
I don't think there's any question about that. And one of the most important that they will ever make. And many of them have had to make it in this 2021 class without ever being on campus and dealing directly with people and seeing just having that experience. It's already a step of faith doing what they're doing. Yes. Even when you get those visits in, you're entrusting your potential career, whether that be just for the 3 to 4 years in college, your studies, and then your potential profession, whether that be on the football field or otherwise. It's dedicated to what decision you're going to make there. And it's just not an informed decision. We're always encouraging young people to make informed decisions. Yeah. Well, right. we're taking that away from them.
Well, Mark, it's almost like, would you buy a car or buy a house without really looking at it? You could probably do it now if you had to, the way that the cameras are and the video that we get, but until you're in there, it's not gonna be the true picture of what's going on. And look, what this may lead to, if the waiver, the one-time waiver, the free one, as they call it, if that goes through in April, Mark, are we going to have just sheer madness almost once these kids get on campus and they don't like what they see and they're saying, this is not what you told me it was going to be, Coach. Well, then I'm going somewhere else. My concern with this, and this may be something that won't happen, but my concern, Mark, is could we have more transfers going on because of buyer's remorse, shall we say, than we ever would normally have if the kids could be on the campus?
We've already got a transfer portal that's flooded now, even before this. And I think there's a trend. I'm going to state this without saying that I've tracked the numbers or anything like that, but I do think that there's been a trend based on what I've seen of players making that transfer decision to a place closer in proximity to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And with their family and their friends, they can see them play and so forth. But I think the bottom line for this, Mark, it's just the fact of I think they understood it in the beginning, but I think now we've reached that point of diminishing returns, right? To where at some point you just got to go ahead and trust your schools, trust your coaches, and I would even say the kids and the parents to be able to work this through.
Got Brent Barrett on the line. He's joined us many, many times here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and you can catch Brent at First Coast News and also College Sports Today. We're actually, Brent, looking for a name to this show that we can kick around and use. So I guess those two are taken. So we're not going to take either one of those, but we'll certainly be kicking one around. We've got the just ingenious names that I came up with for Florida State Seminoles Live and Ohio State Buckeyes Live and Miami Hurricanes Live. Took me hours to brainstorm those. So if all falls through, we'll stay with SEC Live.
Yes.
We'll go with that. Let's get to the comments and questions right here. And we've also got a number of talking points. And again, Brent, whenever you need to take off. But the Rod Favre is asking about the gap between Alabama and the rest of the SEC. And before we let the expert cut loose on this one, I'll just simply say that to me, Georgia's the closest. The personnel's almost equal when you evaluate the talent. Now, if JT Daniels can come through and be the guy, then maybe they completely close the gap. And then Alabama, I think there are college football fans that are wrestling between, is it just going to be Alabama because it's always Alabama, or the losses of Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, Mac Jones on down the line actually going to hurt their production this year?
Well, I can tell you right now, I think this defense will be better. And a lot of SEC fans are shuddering to think about this. What if Henry To'oTo'o, maybe the best linebacker in the SEC, goes to Alabama from Tennessee? So I think that's a possibility too. I know I like what you said about Georgia. I mean, look, Georgia's had so many 5-stars that they recruited. It's really hard to ignore where they are, particularly, again, if JT Daniels adds the balance and stability with that offense as we think that it might at this point too. And with Georgia, we've got a couple of guys who are coming back also with Julian Rochester and Demetrius Robinson, the wide receiver, and the defensive lineman that will add depth with that too. I would also throw A&M in there too, Mark, because they have really done a great job in, frankly, rebuilding their line of scrimmage. Now, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be after Kellen Mond has left after what seems like about a decade. So that's going to be fascinating. But, Jimbo Fisher will I think be able to do a good job with that too. And I think what we need to say is the biggest games that A&M have this year, i.e. Alabama, are going to be at home. So, I mean, that means something, doesn't it, Mark? Frankly, to have a situation such as that. So, I would certainly say in the East would be Georgia. In the West would be Texas A&M. As far as where Bama is, but again, I agree with Aaron Short there in his comments that the dynasty is nowhere near ending at this point either.
The Florida Gators, of course, gave Alabama its biggest challenge in 2020. Really good football game. That I think that the final score was a little bit closer than the threat was. We're all crediting Florida with giving them a game. They certainly did. They were within firing distance, but when you got the ball at your own 3-yard line with like 8 seconds left in the game, you're not threatening to win the game. So it was never truly in doubt. But you get within a score, you got a chance. And they needed to shut down Alabama before they got a couple first downs and punted the footballs to give themselves a real chance. But they did give Bama the best game there in 2020. And I just got to think that Florida might be more of a different team in 21 than any other team in the conference.
I think that's the question that we've got. And for whoever just signed on, Florida started spring practice today. Now, that's kind of unusual starting in February, but that's what they did. And unfortunately, they're not going to have a spring game, which really is disappointing to me. Now, the stadium is a testing site for COVID, and that's one of the reasons that they use. Now, that they're going to do and provide fans with some streaming opportunities. I don't know what that's going to be. I hope it's more than just stretching. That fans can actually see some of these players that are going on. But look, your point's a good one. I mean, Kyle Trask is gone. Kyle Pitts is gone. Who's going to replace those guys. I mean, Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson are two guys at quarterback who are going to be coming in too. And without going through the whole roster right now, I think, to me, Mark, I think they'll be okay offensively with Mullen and whoever the quarterback's going to be. I think Emory Jones is kind of what, shall we say, that Dan Mullen's used to, that what he had at Ole Miss, a guy who could really run the ball, and it was an adequate passer. So I think that's more of what he likes to do offensively. Mark, the thing to me is how quickly can Todd Grantham retool this defense, especially with guys like Kyrie Campbell, who are gone. When he came back last year, he made a big difference. Marco Wilson, yes, unfortunately, of the shoe throwing fame, he's one of the guys who will be gone too. So that is a big question. Now, again, Florida begins the season playing FAU in Gainesville. Then they go, I think this is kind of intriguing. Then they go to South Florida and Tampa. Now, look, Mark, I'm sure you read between the lines on this one real quick. Tampa is a big Gator fan area. That you've got a lot of alumni in Tampa. So I think that's for recruiting purposes as much as anything else. And again, for Florida, maybe the advantage they've got is they play Bama in Gainesville this year toward the end of September. So that will certainly be interesting to see where that goes. I still think Bama has got the better roster than Florida does. But again, when you're on the road, it's early. For Alabama, you're breaking in a new quarterback. You really never know what's going to be going on. So all these things make Florida rather intriguing for 2021.
Yes, you took my word. The last word of your sentence took it right out of my mouth. Intriguing, because I don't know that there was a team that brought us more highs and more lows in one season over the span of a couple months. On one hand, if you would have told me at the beginning of last season, Florida's going to beat Georgia, win the East, give Bama's going to be the best team in college football by far, and you know what? Florida's going to give them their best game, going to play within 6. I would have said, great year for Dan Mullen. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, they broke through. Well, no. Dan Mullen ran onto the field against Missouri and caused a big debacle there. He complained about the crowd noise with 18 or 20,000 people in the stands at Texas A&M, and that was a big issue. They had a shoe throwing incident, which cost them a shot at a college football playoff possibility against LSU. They lost that game, and then half the team didn't show up, and they gave up against Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl and gave up 55 points.
Well, and listen, two things there. The LSU debacle is really what hurt this team desperately. If they win that game, they're going to Atlanta, frankly, with whether it happened or not, we don't know, but at least the hype would have been ramped up tremendously with the possibility of them, if they won that game, they were going to the playoffs. And again, you get a situation where they play Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl, and after that, you've got Dan Mullen talking about, well, our scout team didn't play real well, so you can imagine that did not go over with Gator fans at all. And then, as you mentioned, you had so many of the players opted out or basically quit on their team for the game. I still say, Mark, in that Oklahoma game, if that had been a playoff game, if we had expanded the playoffs like we should have in this COVID year, and that was a playoff game, that would have been one of the most anticipated games of the year, frankly. And if all those Gator players who opted out would have played, it would have made a tremendous difference for the Gators in that game. Unfortunately, it didn't. And your point's a good one. What an 8-4 year, Mark, that really should have been at least a couple more wins, and as far as double-digit wins.
Yeah, so Florida trying to figure out how they replace an offense and then fix some defensive problems are hard at work here, starting on Thursday today. For the first day of spring practice, we had some updates from Jackie Franchuli from All Gators, and check out that video that we posted yesterday. All right. I want to get your take on the Tennessee situation. Josh Heupel trying to put together a staff, lures in a co-defensive coordinator from Penn State to run the defense. And how have you taken to these hirings thus far?
I think the ones that have probably helped them particularly are Rodney Gardner, who comes over to coach the defensive line. Look, if you're Josh Heupel, like Brian Harsin at Auburn, you've got to get some SEC experienced guys in there. And Gardner's able to do that. Willie Martinez also comes in as a DB coach, and that's going to help. And Tim Banks from Penn State coming in. He was the defensive coordinator at Penn State. He is coming in, or at least he's certainly very close to it, Mark. Correct me as far as what you know with that. But so those are guys that we know a little bit about. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the staff we don't know. He brought some of them from UCF. Now, Cody Burns, who used to be at Auburn, is a guy that is familiar to us. And I think what Heupel will do for them is Heupel will do something with that offense. And the offense last year was abysmal, particularly in the third quarter for whatever reason. They were up and down and all around at quarterback. Garantano got benched not once, not twice, but 3 times during the season. So I think if they can settle on a quarterback, get some direction with their offense, that their fans will feel better about this hire. Was it a perfect hire? No, it wasn't. But at the same time, I think Heupel will be okay and can settle them down a little bit, which I think they need. There's been some talk about, well, should they have hired Gus Malzahn instead of Heupel? My answer to that is no. I think it's one of those things to where, and we can get into the UCF hire if you like, but I think Heupel at this point has had more success offensively with quarterbacks over the last few years than Gus has in developing them, and also particularly developing an offensive line.
Dillon Gabriel, the lefty, has turned into a really good one. And Mackenzie Milton, of course, is getting a second chance there at Florida State. And we wish him all the best in trying to recover from a horrific injury, because he put together 2 remarkable seasons at UCF before he was knocked out at the end of 2018. All right, got Brent Barrett on the line for First Coast News and College Sports today. I'll be reviewing the live chat to catch up with some comments and questions there. Gus Malzahn, you brought up the name, and I've heard the same thing out of a number of Tennessee fans that thought, why didn't we go with Gus? He finds himself at UCF in a pretty good spot in regards to, it's a program that has, because of the undefeated season and then the follow-up to that, the next year is one of the few group of 5 schools that actually has they've got a national brand.
They do.
People know who they are now.
That's right.
And he's in the middle of that Central Florida portion that you just mentioned with Dan Mullen and the Gators visiting USF. Well, he's right there in Orlando. So I would think that Gus is going to be able to find a lot of speed for his offense.
Well, they are 2 hours away from us here in Jacksonville. And I really like that school for a variety of reasons. People may not realize this, but they've got around 70,000 students that are associated with that school. And now Orlando, obviously being a big city, as you know, Mark, they've got a lot of community students who go there. So I'm not saying they're all on campus, but what I'm saying is they've just got a lot of students there to begin with. We've been talking about this the whole week here, obviously because UCF is so close to us, and where's this going to go? I think the thing that I don't get with this hire is the reaction that UCF has hired Vince Lombardi. I mean, that's almost been the reaction about this hire. And frankly, I just don't understand that. And what I mean by that is, look, Gus is average losing 4 games a year. That is not an elite football coach by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he is 2-5 or was 2-5 in bowl games, and known to be a quarterback whisperer, and this guy who develops great offenses in the SEC. The last few years, they were number 8, number 10, 6, 8, and 11 in the SEC and total offense. Listen, this is not just my opinion. Auburn beat writers, I'm sure if you've heard the same thing, Auburn beat writers have told us that Gus has really struggled in developing quarterbacks. And I think you can start with Bo Nix as a great example of that as far as Bo and his struggles. The other thing that's really perplexed Auburn beat writers is why that they cannot develop under Gus a much better offensive line, particularly at tackle, Mark. They have struggled greatly in that area. So my thing is, look, can he succeed at UCF? So certainly I think he could, but I think people need to put in perspective as to what either happened or maybe better to be said did not happen at Auburn, and not have the expectations that are going through the roof at UCL, because I think that's really unfair in this situation. Now, what has not been talked about that much, my understanding is, and I've seen this a couple places, that Phil Longo, the offense coordinator at North Carolina, was a possibility for the job, and Sean Lewis at Kent State, I've seen that mentioned as maybe someone else that they looked at. Now, what I've seen today, as of the last few minutes, Gus has hired Herb Hand with the offensive line. He was at Auburn. And I saw Dave Gibbs' name at Missouri, that he may have made that hire too. And again, I'm going to preference that as something to be checked out as much as anything else. I just saw it on Twitter right before we got on. So, I mean, I think he needs to get coaches who are who know the South, who can recruit the South. But Mark, I just kind of want to put that, to me, in perspective of, look, you've made the hire. I understand why you would make the hire, because he's basically probably the best coach with any experience who is available. But I think people really need to step back and look at their expectations of what might go on here, instead of them, as some of the national beat writers have written, that he's going to UCF and that he's going to challenge for a national championship, which frankly, at this point, I just don't agree with that at all.
I seem to be right in line with you on this one, Brent, because as soon as Gus Malzahn got fired at Auburn, he suddenly, based on the feedback I received from viewers and from other people in the media as well, turned into one of the greatest coaches in the land, suddenly. And if you really look at what Auburn's capable of doing, I understand they play a brutal schedule. They play in the SEC West. They've got to play Georgia every year. They always schedule somebody tough out of conference. I understand it's brutal what they face every year. But I also understand that ever since Pat Dye built what the current or modern Auburn football program has looked like in the early 80s with the help of Bo Jackson starting in 82, Auburn has generally been near the top of the SEC through the Dye years, through the Terry Bowden years. Tommy Tuberville did well again. You know, he had an undefeated team there, of course. You can win at Auburn. You can win. And so for Gus Malzahn, and all credit to going to a BCS championship game, taking a 2-10, a 3-9 team, a winless team in the SEC the previous season, and taking them to the brink. That season, everything fell into place. That Georgia game and the Alabama game, of course, but you've got to compete and be close to have those work for you as well. But since then, I just get the impression from people that they're just resigned that Auburn's never going to compete for much. So you should be happy with 8-4 all the time. And that's, he's lost 4 or 5 games every year he's been there since 2014.
Yeah, well, and look, no further than this year, Mark, when, let's be honest, the were gifted that Arkansas game when Bo Nix threw the pass basically backward, and that should have been a fumble and should have been Arkansas's ball, and the game would have been over. And then if you remember the Ole Miss game, where they had another official faux pas in that game on the kickoff, which should have been an Ole Miss touchdown, or at least their football, depending on where you are. And frankly, they got a lot of help from the officials in the Kentucky game. If you remember that game, Kentucky is in a situation where they are controlling the game. Their running back is in the end zone by about a yard, and for whatever reason, that was not called a touchdown as it should have been. So, I mean, the truth of the matter is, they were very fortunate. Mark, this year wasn't. It was an average season, but it was close to being an unmitigated disaster. So, and look, Auburn fans, and I know you've heard this like I have, in knowing a lot of the media in the state of Alabama, the Auburn fans have wanted to be rid of Gus for the last 5 years, because they knew where the program was going and where the struggles were during this time. So, and I'll be very curious how Brian Harsin's going to do and how he will pick up the pace. But to me, and then Gus is talking about being free to be able to call plays, and he's going to do that the rest of his life. Well, I think that when I first heard that, Mark, my question there was, well, I mean, you're the head coach at Auburn. You can do what you want to as far as calling plays. No one's telling you not to call plays. So I thought that was kind of a curious remark. But at the same time, I'm and you said it well, I'm just real curious as to how Gus became an elite coach from the way the debacle happened in the bowl game until what came up on in this period of time.
And I understand a coach wants to sell his program and be appreciative of the opportunity, but UCF is not one of the 20 best jobs in the country.
No. Look, it's a good job. Now, sure. I will say this, Mark. I will be very curious, and I really hope they do. I'm a real non-Power 5 guy, frankly, as far as appreciating what those schools have to deal with. And there's been plenty of speculation, and still is with this next round of expansion that's coming up in the middle of this decade, when we redo all the television contracts and hopefully will expand the playoffs. Would a UCF, with where they are located, with their number of students and so forth, could they be added to one of your Power 5 conferences, Mark, at some point? Certainly what they hope to be able to do, and I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that I think they're really on, and I'm with you. It's not a top 20 job, but I still, even with what they have to offer, am wondering in a few years, will they be attractive enough to some commissioners to join their conference?
I restructured the conferences recently, and I sent that northern faction of the ACC to another conference.
Yeah.
The Syracuse, Boston College contingent, right. Pitt, and Boston College. Yeah, I sent those back out of the conference. And this was several years ago when USF was playing better football, sure. At the time when they could have been compared to the bottom 4 or 5 of the ACC. And I inserted UCF and USF into the ACC and thought that was a good fit and bring it back to being an Atlantic Coast, a true Southern Atlantic Coast conference.
Yeah. And well, you've got the Notre Dame question that I'm surprised no one's asked that yet as far as chiming in with that. Look, that's not going to happen, I don't think, anytime soon. As long as Notre Dame can be an independent, I think they're going to take advantage of that. But at the same time, Mark, wouldn't it great? And we cover the ACC too, like the SEC. But it was really great to have them involved the way that they were with the ACC, and they added so much to it. And I do think at some point Notre Dame may be given a deal they can't refuse. So we will see with that. But no, I'm with you. The ACC needs some improvement along that line too. And look, I wonder if some of these teams more like West Virginia. And again, I know we've thrown geography out the window as far as expansion is concerned, but you really do wonder as far as pragmatics, would some of these schools, Mark, rethink where they are and maybe try to change some of this as one of the major reasons would be their travel schedules.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We appreciate the contribution coming in from Lamar Stevens. Lamar joins us on a regular basis, is here supporting. So thank you so much for that, Lamar. He is questioning Texas A&M being elite or being in that conversation. And he's got a list of players right there that have gone to the likes of Alabama and Ohio State and so forth that have not come the way of Texas A&M. Jimbo's doing a great job on the recruiting trail. But he's missed on some.
Sure.
But of course, everybody has.
Yeah. Well, now some of those guys we're talking about also didn't go to Texas either, did they, Mark? So,
so we've got Alabama and Ohio State.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm thinking about the Brockermeyers here and JoJo Earl among those with that too. Look, but I get his point, and I think the thing that Mark. I think A&M is on the I think they're on the cusp at this point. Now, look, Jimbo was hired, and as you and I said, his clock really started this year. And they knew that he needed a couple of years, did they not, for roster management and to be able to rebuild that situation from when Kevin Sumlin was there. But look, I mean, we covered the Florida State when Jimbo was there too. And look, when you like him or not, Jimbo's a great football coach. And a lot of, or let me put it this way, he may not be a great football coach. He could be a great football coach before it's over. I mean, he's got one national championship that he can claim at Florida State. Could he win another one? I don't know. But I do think in terms of facilities, in terms of recruiting, that A&M could be setting themselves up for the best run that they've had right now in decades. It may not happen, and I'm not going to call them elite yet. But Mark, I think a lot of the things are stacking up in his favor in order for that maybe to happen.
Good stuff from Brent Beard from First Coast News and also College Sports Today. Brent's been talking of college football with us for quite a few years here, and we always appreciate the conversation. Brent, if you've got any more time, I'm going to go to the next topic. What do you have for us here?
I've got about 5 more minutes, Mark, so let's go.
How about this Alabama staff with also the news of Ben Davis transferring?
Yeah, first of all, unfortunately, Ben Davis was, I think he was a real specimen, but Mark, for whatever reason, it just didn't work. And I think one thing Saban does that he doesn't get enough credit for is he tries to find these players who need to move on, kind of a soft landing spot, shall we say. That would be interesting to see where he goes. And Ben left a heartfelt message for Alabama fans at that time too. So we will follow and see where that goes. I think this staff, frankly, he does an amazing job a lot of times. And look, everything Nick Saban does centers around recruiting. And we understand that. And these head coaches, Bill O'Brien, obviously Doug Marrone, who was here in Jacksonville. Now, Doug Marrone was not a great NFL head coach. I'll be honest about that. But Doug Marrone's a good guy. I think he'll be fine as an offensive line coach. But you and I both know in his most recent hire, and forgive me for mispronouncing his name, Mark, help me on this, but Jay Valaya, I hope I'm close with that, who he just hired. Yeah, that replaces Carl Scott. He obviously has NFL ties too. And Mark, the bottom line is these kids, that's their main goal, that they want to play in the NFL. And when they're sitting in their particular unit, I mean, when you're on the Alabama offensive line, and you're talking to Doug Marrone, who was in the NFL, and you're talking about a guy who get you to the NFL. Those guys sit up and listen when they make hires like that. So, but I will say this: I think the continuity of this staff that stayed together for what, Mark, at least 2 or 3 years, had a tremendous advantage. It was one of the big reasons why Alabama won a national championship this year, because of that chemistry of that football team.
Absolutely. Alabama, do we know when they hit spring practice? Do we know of any other teams in the SEC that have set their spring dates?
Now spring dates are still a little bit up in the air. Bama and Georgia, their spring games are on the 17th. So some of these other, again, Florida, if people are just tuning in, Florida does not have a spring game this year, which frankly will be the second year in a row that they won't. Last year because of COVID. So I think we will get more firm dates coming up. I would certainly think in the next week, something like that. Look, I like spring. I think it's important. I mean, we've been talking about Alabama, and I mean, Mark, my goodness, how important would the spring be for Bryce Young, the quarterback, to get 15 of those in? And you could fill in the blank with pretty much anybody for our viewers, whoever your favorite team is right now, in order to do it. So I hope they have everybody is able to get 15 practices in. And I still think having a spring game is important for the fans to be able to connect with the team. Now, all these spring games are going to be like 25% as they were during the regular season games, with hope that it would be more by the time we get to September and August with week 0 games. So right now, again, spring on the verge of happening, but it has happened at Florida.
Good stuff from Brent Beard. Brent, you know that you're always welcome here, and I appreciate the conversation every time. You can catch Brent on First Coast News and also College Sports Today.
Well, let me say as I go out here that for our viewers, I think they all know this, anything Mark Rogers does is going to be first class. It's going to be very obviously entertaining. And I'm always glad to be an honor to be able to be a part of it for everyone, and certainly hope they enjoy that. And I'm glad that you're here and deserve to be here for as long as you want to be here, or like me, for forever long our daughters allow us to do anything. Right, Mark?
That's it. They call the shots. No question about that when it comes right down to it. All right, everyone. We're going to talk Miami football here in just a few minutes. 7 o'clock Eastern time, top of the hour, main channel. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Again, main channel. Head on over there. We're going to get set up for Miami live talk with Cam Underwood from State of the U.